Alright, today what we're going to have a look at is finding the midpoint of a line segment and also finding the length of a line segment. So as you can see, we're going to use our Cartesian plane to help us with our demonstration. You won't always be given a Cartesian plane, sometimes you'll just be given a couple of points. So we'll learn both ways to do that. To start with, we'll probably just have a look at your terminology. A line, by definition, is infinite. So when you're plotting a line using a linear equation, there is no start point, end point. It is an infinite line. So what you normally see on a Cartesian plane is a line segment. So it's just part of that line. So it has a start point, it has an end point, and therefore it also has a midpoint. And so you will sometimes need to be able to figure that one out. And so what we're going to do is have a couple little practice runs on how to find our midpoint and also our length. Now, it's not a bad way to start is to just by simply finding out exactly what our start point and our end point are. So whenever you're working off a Cartesian plane, that would be your first step. Often you'll just be given the coordinates as your start point, end point. So if you don't, I recommend that you start. So you go left to right. So we've got first one, we always go our x values first. 1, -3 is my start point, and then I go across to my end point of 5 and 3. Alright, so how do I find my midpoint now? I'll try and spell it right to begin with. Midpoint, we've got an equation that we use. If I have a look to start with, I can probably assume it's going to be somewhere in there. So I'm thinking it's probably going to end up at 3 and 0. But let's just have a look to double test. So what we're going to do is basically we find halfway between our x's and halfway between our y's. And so to do that, just like you would if you were finding, I guess, the average or a mean or something. So I'm just going to add them together and divide them by 2. So I have my 2x values added together, divide by 2, and my 2 y values are going to do the same thing. Right, so here my x1, I've got 1, x2, I have 5, and I divide those by 2, y1, I have -3, y2, I have 3, I divide those by 2. Right, so I end up there, I've got 6 over 2, -3 plus 3 is going to be 0 over 2. So therefore I have my points at 3 and 0, which is what I anticipated in the first place. See if I can fix that up. No, for some reason it doesn't like me. It's okay, not many people do. But let's have a look at trying to find the length of the line segment. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use my knowledge of Pythagoras. If I have a bit of a look at this line and I cut across there and I cut up there, I can see that I've actually created a right angle triangle. Now just by looking on my Cartesian plane, this one's nice and simple, I can see I'm going across 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. And then I'm going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces. So I can use my Pythagoras, so I go a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and that's going to tell me that my answer is 7.21. So if I just put that over there, I'll see if I can get there without having a look at the Cartesian plane. So again, if I'm going back to my start point and end point to work this one out. The way I do that is I have to remember this equation where I say, I'm going to call it d for distance between the 2 points, and I've got a nice long, looks complicated but it's not really sort of equation where I have x2 minus x1 all squared plus y2 minus y1 all squared, and I find the square root of that. That looks confusing, but let's have a look and break it down to see what it actually means. Well, x2 minus x1. So here's my x2, here's my x1. So x2 being 5, x1 meaning 1, or 5 take 1, that's where I get my full. y2 minus y1. Again, here's y2, 3, here's y1, negative 3, 3 minus negative 3, remembering that minus negative 3 is a double negative and it becomes a positive, so 3 plus 3 is 6. That's where I get my 6 from. So what I've done there is, there's my distance, there's my distance. So if you look at it like Pythagoras, you've got a squared plus b squared. And we know that that gives us c squared. We know that when I use Pythagoras, I have to find the square root of that answer. And so that's why I've done that here, put it in one simple step. So, as always, I write my rule, then I substitute my values in. So x2, I go back here, my second x, so I've got 3, x1 is negative 3, that's all squared. Y, whoop, I've made a mistake there, I've done the y's first. My apologies. So x2 is 5, x1 is 1, so 5 take 1 all squared. Then I've got my 3 minus negative 3 all squared. And so I'm just going to punch that into the calculator exactly as it looks. So I hit my square root, or my shift squared, open my brackets, 5 minus 1, close brackets, squared, plus, open brackets, 3 minus negative 3, close brackets, squared, enter, and lo and behold, my answer is 7.21. Calculator will try and tell me it's 2 square root 13 to be more accurate, but we're going to the 2 decimal places and we're going with 7.21. So if you have a look, here's the 2 important parts of that page. You've got this rule here, probably shouldn't highlight yellow and orange, and you've got this rule here. So those are the 2 that you've got to take note of, and remember, let's have a bit of a practice on another couple, so make sure that we know what we're doing. So, oh, I forgot to erase that from last time. I'm not starting again though. Oh, this is why Miss Carr's videos will always be better than mine. Alright, so I'm going to start with my start point and my end point so that I know what they are. My start point, negative 4, negative 2. My end point, 3, 2. My midpoint. Right, my midpoint becomes x1 plus x2 divided by 2, y1 plus y2 divided by 2, and I put my values in. So my x's, I've got negative 4 plus 3 divided by 2, and I've got negative 2 plus 2 divided by 2. Now I'm going to shortcut and I'm going to sort of do all of that in one step. Negative 4 plus 3 becomes negative 1, negative 1 over 2, so I've got negative 0.5, negative 2 plus 2, well, that's obviously 0 over 2, so I've got 0. So I can have a look and go, right, am I on the money for that midpoint? So I'm looking at about here, which is negative 0.5 and 0. So it's handy having the graph there so you can check your answer. But let's find my length of this line segment. My big fancy rule. D equals x2 minus x1 all squared, square root of x2 minus x1 all squared, plus y2 minus y1 all squared. Again, I'm going to sub those values in. So it is the square root of x2 becomes 3. x1 is negative 4 all squared, plus y2 is 2 minus y1 negative 2 all squared. Now once again I just punch that as it is into the calculator. Square root of, open brackets, 3 minus negative 4, close bracket squared, plus etc, etc. And that will tell me my answer is square root of 65 or 8.06. So the last one we're going to have a look at is, you'll notice that I've gone with a negative gradient this time. So we'll just make sure that the rule still works with the negative gradient, and I'll follow the exact same method. My start point, my end point, and my midpoint. Why does that always happen to me? My start point this time, I've got 1, 4. My end point is 4, -3. So my midpoint. Okay, so x1 plus x2 divided by 2, y1 plus y2 divided by 2, and that's going to be my coordinates. So I've got 1 plus 4 divided by 2, and 4 plus -3 divided by 2. So 5 divided by 2, I'm going to end up with 2.5. 4 plus -3 is the same as 4 take 3, so that's going to be 1 divided by 2, so I'm going to end up with 0.5. Let's check. I'm looking at, oh yeah, 2.5 point hard there, so my middle point's around there, so I think I'm on the money. Right. And again, let's double check, make sure that my line segment length rule works with a negative gradient. D equals square root of x2 minus x1 all squared plus y2 minus y1 all squared. My values go in. So x2 is going to be 4 minus 1 squared plus y2 -3 minus 4 all squared. I punch all of that into my calculator. Square root of, open brackets, 4 minus 1, close bracket squared, plus, open brackets, -3 minus 4, close bracket squared. And once I do all of that, it'll tell me that it's the square root of 58, or 7.62. Bob's your uncle, Mary's your aunt. Happy days. Have a bit of a look at that. Have a bit of a go, have a bit of a play around. Like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends. Have a good day.